12 state senators join us to discuss the moratorium and more. Democrat Bill Nelson of Florida and Republican Roger Wicker of Mississippi. Senator Wicker, the revised moratorium would allow some drilling to resume with various provisos, but the opposition to it has not gone away. Why not? Yeah. Senator Wicker, I'm afraid we're not here. Senator Wicker, my apologies, we're not hearing you. We'll try to adjust the microphone. Can you hear me, Senator Nelson?
I can.
Okay, let me go to you first while we adjust this. Explain, you've supported the moratorium from the beginning. Explain the benefits that you think would come from it.
Well, the question is, do we want another disaster? And I don't think we do, and as testimony thereof, look at what has happened today. 4 major companies other than BP announced that they were putting together a task force so that they would have safety equipment in place that could immediately come in. For example, one of the things that they're going to develop is it would be like a big bell that would go down over the blowout preventer and anchor in the sand of the seabed, and that would immediately stop the oil from spewing out. That is another indication that people realize that we really have a safety problem in this deep water drilling. And until we have some comfort through this investigation for this very deep water, not the shallow water, the deep water, I think we ought to hold off and make sure we're safe.
All right, Senator Wicker, have we got your microphone fixed and earpiece? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I hear you very well.
Yeah,
apologies for that. So explain the opposition to the moratorium.
Well, we've had 42,000 wells over 60 years. This one major incident shouldn't shut down the petroleum that we need and also the jobs that Gulf Coast families need. There are new safety standards in place since this blowout, and I think they should give us a comfort level. The new endeavor that Senator Nelson spoke about should make him feel even better about resuming this. But the practical matter is our economy needs this oil. Our Gulf Coast families need the jobs. And a Moody's study just the other day said actually the economic devastation from the moratorium could be more than actually from the oil spill itself.
Well, Senator Wicker, just to stay with you, if not a moratorium, what do you want to see from the federal government at this point? How heavy a hand? Because there's a lot of talk now about what kind of regulation. What would you like to see? Well,
I support the new safety regulations, new regulations about different kind of cement, new regulations about the casing. And I think, as a matter of fact, most of the oil companies, not BP, but most of them, had been adhering to these without incident over time. So I feel good about that new step, and I think it probably will provide for less of a chance of this 1 in 42,000 incident happening again.
And Senator Nelson, what about going that regulatory route? And also what about, of course, the jobs argument, which is much of the opposition to the moratorium is based on?
Well, the jobs argument is a legitimate question, and we are always in a question of trade-offs. What is more important? And by the way, this is a modified moratorium, and it's not going to go on forever. And it's certainly in everybody's interest to get the moratorium over quickly. And yes, that task force, Roger, is developing this new device, but it's not ready. So the question is, what is in the trade-off, where is the greatest danger? And I think we need to just buy a little more time, even though it is going to sacrifice some jobs.
And Senator Wicker, I mean, as we listen to this, is this largely about the dictates of your individual states? We're talking about balancing trade-offs here. Tourism, perhaps on one hand, oil industry and jobs on the other.
Well, we're all interested in tourism in Mississippi, too. We have balanced oil production and tourism in the Gulf Coast, with the exception of Florida, for decades now. But I think you just had someone on right before us who's not from the Gulf Coast at all. This is a very important part of the United States economy, and there's no sense in a 6-month moratorium causing more loss than the oil spill itself when we now have new safety regulations and new precautions that should prevent this in the future. We don't quit flying planes when there's an aircraft crash, and we shouldn't cut off this very vital part of our economy because of this very serious and tragic incident.
Senator Nelson, let me turn to one other subject that has been continuing throughout this. That's the coordination between the federal government and state and local governments. Times of coordination and getting along, and other times of real tension. Where do you assess the situation right now?
Well, to begin with, the command and control was not there. And local officials were not getting the information, and in the case of Florida officials, they were not getting reimbursed. Over the course of time, that has improved, and so the whole situation is functioning better. Now we're in a situation, assuming that the oil stays capped and then that the relief well is successful, what we're in is scoop it all off the surface, and then let's get to the big unknown. And the big unknown is how much oil is underneath, what do we do about it, and what is going to be the ultimate effect on the health of the Gulf.
Senator Wicker, what's your assessment of the federal versus state and local governments?
Well, I don't disagree with much of what Bill just said. Big bureaucracies don't work very well. And the Department of the Interior, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Coast Guard haven't worked very well in this instance. It turns out BP is a big bureaucracy too, and the communication has just been terrible. Certainly there's an opportunity for lessons learned from this too. There was not the communication between the spotters. We were so slow in getting those skimmers out there in the boom. A lot of this oil that's now on the shores of Florida and Mississippi and other states could have been prevented with earlier action, and I don't understand why, but except that whenever I see a big bureaucracy, I don't have really great expectations.
Now, we were just talking about tourism, and late this afternoon, the White House announced that there's going to be some high-level tourists to the Gulf, to your state, Senator Nelson. President's family will be down there. I assume that's welcome news.
Indeed it is. I didn't know it. You're telling me the news, and I hope that they thoroughly enjoy some of the world's most beautiful beaches. I want to point out that when you compare Roger and my state, he has an infinitesimal amount of coastline compared to the coastline of Florida. Same thing when you compare the amount of beaches. And so when you start evaluating whether or not you want to have drilling out there in the Gulf that is potentially not safe, we don't think the trade-off is worth it until you know and you've done your safety checks.
And a brief last word from you, Senator. Senator Wicker, the president, of course, took some flack when family went up to Maine after asking Americans to visit the Gulf. Here he is. I think it's in middle of August they're going to be going to the Gulf region.
Well, we welcome them to the Gulf, and you know, we don't have as much coastline as Bill has in Florida, but it's mighty nice, and I'll be down there this weekend enjoying it myself with my family.
All right, Senator Roger Wicker, Senator Bill Nelson, thank you both very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.